Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the second part of the legislative branch stuff. This one's actually going to be considerably shorter than the first one, which I know is pretty long. Um, but this one is actually going to be looking specifically at what legislative committees are and kind of what they do and why they matter. And here's a quote from Woodrow Wilson: Congress in session is Congress on public exhibition, whilst Congress in its committee rooms is Congress at work. Sort of suggesting that you may have seen pictures of or think about, Congress when they're all sitting together in the big room and debating things. You can actually watch it on C-SPAN if you're really interested in putting yourself to sleep for a while. Um, but when Congress is actually in its committee rooms is when he is arguing that they are doing their most important work. So let's take a look at kind of what that is. But what are legislative committees and what is their purpose and function? Well, generally speaking, what committees are is just subgroups of people that are in the House of Representatives or in the Senate. Basically, they will create groups to be able to focus on particular specific policy-related issues, and then we'll have a certain number of either the people in the House of Representatives, if it's a House committee, or senators, if it's a Senate committee, and they will join this committee in general to be experts on that particular topic, and to help inform other people about those particular issues. So one of the first things that they do, of course, is in these committees is that they will consider bills. So when bills are being proposed, and people kind of need to figure out a little bit more about whether or not they support it or not, they'll take a look at these bills first, and they'll use their own knowledge on that particular issue to put some notes, on the bill itself, and they'll make some markups, maybe some suggestions for changes, maybe some clarifying stuff for other people. So that, if someone's trying to pass an agricultural bill, they can send it to the agricultural committee, and then these people that know a fair amount about agriculture can put some notes on it so that the people that don't know that much about agriculture can figure out a little bit more about whether or not they support this bill and whether or not it will be a good idea to pass it in representing their own people that elected them. Next, the committees maintain oversight of executive agencies. So of course there is a Senate Appropriations Committee. So there's this committee related to in the Senate related to helping to fund government stuff, right? And this here is a picture of Donald Rumsfeld, who was the Secretary of Defense previously, having to testify, sort of almost like in court, to explain to this committee to see whether or not he really used money well. So these committees really also oversee these government agencies and make those agencies answer to them to make sure that stuff is operating appropriately, right? Operating the way that it should. But they also conduct investigations. So if there's something that they have oversight on, if there's a topic that they know a fair amount about, and there's like funny business going on in government, sometimes the committees will get involved in holding these investigations. So like here's a picture of the New Orleans mayor really having to be tried in court in front of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, based on his actions in Hurricane Katrina. This committee basically took him to the equivalent of court to see whether or not they should prosecute him against his role in Hurricane Katrina stuff. So they also kind of do stuff like that. But let's take a look at the different types of committees. So first, there are committees known as standing committees, and these committees are basically permanent. They always exist. They always have people that are part of them, and they always have full legislative function. They have full ability to look at bills and full ability to represent, whatever the issue is that their committee is about. Sometimes there's also subcommittees. So let's say if there's an agricultural standing committee, sometimes they'll make like a wine committee to like focus specifically on wine grapes, as an example. That's not like a real subcommittee, but as an example of sometimes how there could be. There's also select committees, sometimes called special committees. Basically, sometimes they'll make a committee to focus specifically on a limited issue. So an issue that will exist only for a certain amount of time. Um, so, for example, they might make a committee if the United States decides to, move forward on the Olympics stuff, right? They might have like a special committee just to make sure that legislative law stuff is moving forward in relationship to deciding to hold the Olympics in the United States. And then after it's over, they'll get rid of that committee, right? It's very temporary and it's a very specific purpose. Um, Also, there are committees known as joint committees, and these here include members of both chambers. So, a joint committee will have folks from the House of Representatives on it, and it will also have folks from the House of Representatives. So, joint committees include both. Um, and then also there will be conference committees. And so conference committees are sort of like joint committees because they involve people from the House and the Senate. But the difference is that conference committees are specifically related to trying to even out differences between similar bills. So like if in the House there's a certain understanding of a bill, and in the Senate they understand the same bill a little bit differently, then a conference committee will get together to try to make it so that that bill looks the same for both houses, so that there can be compromise and there can be a majority, so that they can get that bill to pass, basically. So some examples of standing committees. Here are some examples. So again, I've been talking a lot about this agricultural committee. There's also an appropriations committee that deals with money for the government. There's an armed services one that deals with military stuff. There's an education and workforce one that deals with public education and stuff for employees. There's government reform, so a committee that's related to trying to help with laws related to reforming the government. Small business committees, resource committees, judiciary committees, veterans affairs committees, so a whole bunch of different kinds of committees all of the time. And it allows them obviously to be able to focus on very specific issues and send them to these committees first before they're covered by the whole group. And here's some of the ones that are in the Senate. So there's Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee. There's the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee that deals with supporting laws about banking or supporting laws on housing rights for people. There is the Energy and Natural Resources, so a committee that's focused on laws about how renewable energy is an example, or protecting our natural resources, those kinds of things. Small Business and Entrepreneurship Standing Committee, Veteran Affairs Standing Committee. So there's a whole bunch of these kinds of things. For House and Special Committees, one example of ones that have existed recently is there's the Energy Independence and Global Warming Committee. So there's a specific special committee that just looks at energy independence and global warming. So like trying to work towards getting renewable resources to combat this issue of global warming. There's also a Senate Select Committee on Ethics, and also a Senate and House Select Committees on Intelligence. So things related to dealing with overseeing the Central Intelligence Agency, basically, and the FBI is sort of what this Committee on Intelligence is sort of about. Some joint committees is there's a Joint Economic Committee, because obviously if you're dealing with the economics of the U.S., it's sort of a good idea to have both the House and the Senate involved. Printing is generally related to like the printing of money, so also economic stuff. You will want both folks from both houses to work on that. Same as taxation. So you can see that when it comes to money and comes to the economy, generally we want folks from both places to be involved because it's a pretty big deal.